This is a society infected by socialism. We will get rid of the Department of Labor, the Department of Science and Technology, the Ministry of Education, also known as the Ministry of Indoctrination. The thievery of politics is over. What would you say if you were paid $1,000 and then 3 months later it was only worth $800? 3 months later again it was only worth $640. 3 months after that it was only worth $512. In other words, in just 9 months you lost half of the value of your money. You'd probably be pretty pissed. You might even elect someone like Javier Milei, who's ready to change Argentina. Or as Trump says, make Argentina great again by joining the dollar. In this video, we're going to break down what just happened, who just got elected in Argentina, and what it means for the US dollar and Argentina. Oh, and keep in mind, this is not just a warning to the United States regarding what this means for the United States dollar versus BRICs, a currency of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But it's also a warning to those who promote the ideology that Mr. Javier Milei is super anti. So in other words, it might be a little bit of a warning shock to those on the left. Buckle up. I think the big problem in Argentina is a cultural problem. This is a society infected by socialism. And what we need to achieve is to remove socialism from the people's minds. And the main promoters of these ideas are the politicians. I suggest you take a look at what Garcila's statements were. She is supposed to be one of the best. Do you know what they are against? Those politicians, they're against the libertarians, because we libertarians are the ones who dare to confront the politicians and tell them they are not the solution, that they are the problem. These politicians are the sort of sociopaths who want to make us believe that we are mentally invaded and invalid in every sense because we cannot live without them. But in reality, those who cannot live without us are them. In other words, if the country were divided between those who produce on one side and the other side, those effing politicians, syndicates, and a whole bunch of parasites would sink and die. Wow, who just won the presidency in Argentina has implications for the United States. Here is Javier Milei. He is 53 years old. He just won by a vote of 55.8% to 44%. Javier Milei has won. Today is November 19th. He will be taking office December 10th for his inauguration. It is no surprise he won, though, given that he ran against the Minister of the Economy. And let me tell you a thing or two about the Minister of the Economy. 40% of Argentina is below the poverty rate. There are 46 million people in Argentina. That's about 15% larger than California. But the country is facing an inflation rate that makes their money worth less than it actually costs to print it. Less than 2/10 of 1 penny compared to the US dollar. So $1, less than 2/10 of 1 penny per Argentinian peso. The economy has been nosediving, and the country has over $40 billion in IMF debts that are going to have to be paid back soon. Although, I have a feeling how Javier is going to take this. But first, before we get into some of the policies or some of the video clips of Javier Milei, we need to ask ourselves, what does this mean for America? Well, this is why we're making this video on this channel. Keep in mind, I also started a side channel. It's called Meet Kevin Politics, where we just do politics. But this is broad because it has to do with the dollar. Why? Because Javier was the candidate who suggested he is going to move Argentina's currency away from the Argentinian peso, kill the peso, and move to the dollar. That's right, not to crypto, not to Brazil's currency, Venezuela's, Uruguay's, Paraguay's, Ecuador's, Mexico, the European Union's, Chinese's yuan, the Chinese yuan, the Japanese yen. No, they chose the dollar. which makes sense because the dollar, after all, is the most powerful currency in the world. It is used as a peg, well, has been used as a peg by China. It is used as a reference for oil prices. It's traded, oil is traded in the dollar. That's why we call it the petrodollar. And even though that's useful, even if, quite frankly, oil wasn't traded in the petrodollar, the dollar would still reign supreme. There is a lot of fear, though, that the US dollar is going to get replaced by a currency created by BRICs, which would be Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, what's really interesting to know about this is when you look at the global economy, and you look at trade with the United States, Brazil, India, and China trade significantly more with America than Russia does. But Russia is a big proponent of BRICs. Russia and South Africa are the smallest traders with America, and I'm talking pre-Ukrainian invasion, since obviously we sanctioned them. So you might be thinking, oh, but Kevin, come on, of course we trade with them less. Well, even before the invasion, we traded with Russia to the tune of less than $30 billion. We traded last year with China to the tune of $756 billion. India over $150 billion. These are magnitudes greater than the trade that we have with Russia. So I find it very interesting that of the enemies between Russia and China, let's just call them enemies for the sake of currency enemies for a moment here, of these two, I find it very interesting that the United States is 100% fighting a proxy war against China, weakening potentially one of the most vocal members of BRICs. While at the same time now a very Trumpian candidate, Javier Milei, in Argentina, wins, promising to bring the dollar to Argentina to stabilize a 143% inflation rate. He promised us to slash government spending by over 15% of GDP. And Donald Trump, as soon as he was elected, posted on Truth Social. He said, quote, "You will turn your country around and truly make Argentina great again." Javier Milei has promised to bring a chainsaw to government spending, and one of the famous viral clips that's circulating of him is actually right here. Take a look at this, and I want you to tell me, or just think about it, because I'll give you my opinion. Which candidate in America does this remind you of? Ministry of Sports and Tourism. Out. Ministry of Culture. Out. Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. Out. Ministry of Women, Gender, and Diversity. Out. Ministry of Public Works. Out. Even if you resist. Ministry of Science and Technology. Out. Ministry of Labor. Out. Ministry of Education. Out. Indoctrination, he says. Transport. Out. Health. Out. Social Development. Out. The thievery of politics is over. Long live damn liberty. Wow. I honestly, hell yeah. Like, frankly, hell yeah. Really, this is like very Vivek-esque, right? Look, Vivek has the idea of let's get rid of the Department of Education, let's get rid of the FBI, let's slash the government size in half. And there are a lot of Americans who are pro doing exactly that. There's no doubt the government can be run more efficiently. But the difference between America and Argentina is very clear. We sit at, well, with the official numbers, okay, we don't need to go down the jaded tinfoil hat route, okay? We could say their numbers are jaded too, okay? So we'll remove that for a moment. Our numbers are around 4% for inflation. Theirs are around 143%. How many people live below the poverty level? How many below poverty level? Well, it's 40% of people in Argentina are below the poverty level. The United States, 11.5%. Point is, you have vastly different economic outcomes and realities in Argentina versus America. Real median household income in the United States, $73,000 per year. In Argentina, $4,300. That means we have 17 times the income. Now, yes, things are more expensive in America, but let's be clear. The standard of living is substantially worse in Argentina. But while it is interesting to see a Vivek-style candidate take over in Argentina, and we'll get a chance to see what they're able to do in Argentina starting December 10th. It's worth remembering that the pain in America, while it's bad, it's not as bad as what Argentina is experiencing. And that's probably why you're seeing more of an extreme leaning candidate. But again, many people are going to say, you know what? That's exactly what America needs as well. Now, a lot of folks look at this candidacy more so as a very Trumpian candidate and candidacy. They look at this and say, what Milei ends up being able to accomplish will be a sample of what we might get under a Trump 2.0, because both countries are dealing with an inflation problem. Both countries are dealing with an economic problem. Of course, the extremes are very different. Now, again, I personally think that this is very fascinating and will be a great experiment for the strength of the US dollar. Now, I'm not here to shill the dollar over crypto or other alternatives. I think it's all broken anyway, and all fiat that has ever existed ends up going to zero. It always happens. America's just the most powerful country in the world, and it is the least bad out of all of these paper currencies. Eventually, it'll probably die. Let's be clear about that. Now, Argentina will get a few things by joining the dollar. By joining the dollar, they'll immediately get the American paper money level of trust, whatever that level is, and they'll immediately get price stability to some extent, 2 to 4%. Beats 143%. Now that means when you go show up and you get paid $1,000 for doing a certain job, it's not worth $900 30 days later, because that's roughly what it feels like in Argentina right now, which is horrible. Now remember, 143% inflation means $1,000 is worth just $800 3 months later, $640 3 months after that, $512 3 months after that, and after another 3 months, in other words, after a year, you're only left with about $410. That's pathetic. You're better off buying iPads, or if you can afford them, better off buying used iPhones or bread than you are buying or keeping the currency of your own country. So moving to the dollar will be not only a great tool for Argentina, hopefully, in terms of creating stability, it will also come with a risk. And that's the risk that the country won't be able to print money anymore. That actually means the country is going to have to balance their budget, which is exactly what people would like America to do. But America has the power of the money printer. Argentina no longer will if they move currencies. They will lose the power of the money printer, but they will gain the trust of the American currency, again, to the extent that that's available. What that means is maybe you could have more stability in Argentina, slowly rebuild, and maybe at some point in the future, as you fight to root out corruption, you could finally bring back your own currency, so then you could print money again to incentivize growth. Of course, the risk there is reintroducing inflation. Now, it's also worth looking at some other clips, since obviously this figure is a libertarian. He is very anti-left. He is very anti-woke idealisms. Here are just some clips of him just so you could see. What madness are we living in? The madness of stupid political correctness. We're basically like saying, oh, if you don't recite cool socialism, or if you're not woke, then you're violent, then you're a danger to democracy. Come on, guys. We are going to go from being 140th ranked in GDP to the largest shanty town in the world. We're going to be the largest shanty town in the world because of this stupid political correctness. Listen to this. Here's just a brief sample of him on another talk show. This individual, by the way, used to be a talk show host himself. He frequently would rant about the economy. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. I'll speak it. I think the big problem in Argentina is a cultural problem. This is a society infected by socialism. And what we need to achieve is to remove socialism from people's minds. And the main promoters of these ideas are the politicians. Do you know who the existing politicians are against? They're against libertarians like him. Because we are the libertarians, the ones who confront the politicians and say they're not the solution, they're the problem. The politicians are the sort of sociopaths who want to make us believe that we are mentally invaded and invalid in every sense because we cannot live without them. But in reality, those who cannot live without us are them. In other words, if the country were divided between those who produce on one side and on the other side, the effing politicians, syndicates, and a whole bunch of parasites, they would sink and die. Let's separate Argentina then into a north and south like a civil war. Wow. The politician rats are useless, he goes on to say. Honestly, this is obviously very populist, but he's probably 100% right on. So I'm really enthusiastic to see what happens with this candidacy and now presidency in Argentina. Obviously, implementation matters, but this is actually a big boon for the US dollar if it works out. Because if Argentina can go from 143% inflation to stability by moving to the US dollar, and Argentina can finally root out corruption and at least better the government and stabilize the economy, then the case will have been proven for supporting the US dollar. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think in the long run, the US dollar will have problems. I still think in the long run, you're better off having exposure to assets like ownership in companies, businesses, and real estate, because I personally am afraid of paper currency. But if you're worried about the dollar going away anytime soon, the actual opposite is happening right before our eyes.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.